pink boots and a big adventure. The aircraft was a leviathan of steel and rivets. Lily tilted her head back, vibrant pink boots anchored to the ground, and breathed a small, awed wow. It soared into the azure expanse, wings that dwarfed any birds. "Mommy, that's humongous." Carol managed a chuckle, a nervous tremor dancing beneath her ribs. "It certainly is, pumpkin. Now, stick close, okay? Let's get these boarding passes ready." She delved into her handbag, retrieving the printed documents. Sunlight kissed her polished nails as she flattened the pages. "All right, Lilybug, remember what we discussed? Shadow me. Airports can be a maze." Lily nodded, her attention still captivated by the colossal plane. She tentatively reached out and touched the landing gear, the cool metal sleek beneath her fingertips. "Honey, no touching. Who knows what's lurking there?" Carol gently pulled her away. "Germs abound." They shuffled forward in the queue, slowly nearing the gateway. Lily bounced with excitement, the rubber soles of her bright footwear squeaking against the pavement. "Are we going up into the clouds, Mommy? Like, really, really up? Higher than them, sweetheart?" "You'll see." Carol smiled, her apprehension momentarily eclipsed by Lily's infectious joy. Memories of her own maiden voyage surfaced, the blend of exhilaration and slight trepidation. She hoped Lily wouldn't succumb to fear. Finally, they stood before the gate attendant. "Rodriguez, party of 2, Carol announced, presenting their passes." The agent scanned them, a cheerful beep validating their entry. "Enjoy your flight to Grandma's, ladies." Lily's face split into a wide grin, she practically vibrated with anticipation. "Grandma's," she squealed, her voice carrying a bit too far. Several heads swiveled their way. Carol offered a quick, reassuring squeeze. As they traversed the jet bridge, Lily envisioned herself floating amidst the ether, wisps of white brushing her cheeks. She would wave to the feathered creatures and maybe even catch a glimpse of Santa returning her wave. In her mind's eye, tiny wings sprouted from her pink boots, aiding the aircraft's ascent. They located their seats, 22A and 22B, nestled beside the window. Lily clambered into her spot, her feet swinging with boundless energy. Carol quickly hushed her, reminding her to be considerate of other passengers. A man already occupied 22C, the aisle seat. His appearance was unkempt, a tangled beard framing a face etched with weariness, and his clothes bore the unmistakable stamp of travel. He stared intently at the vista beyond the window, oblivious to their arrival. Carol frowned slightly. This wasn't first class, true, but she still expected a baseline level of composure. She subtly guided Lily away from him as she settled in. "Give him some space, sweetie," she whispered. "He looks unsettled." Lily cast another look at the man, her initial enthusiasm waning ever so slightly. He did seem a little intimidating. She noticed a small rip in his jacket and a discoloration that hinted at spilled coffee. Maybe Mommy was right. Perhaps he wasn't someone she should engage with. The cabin began to fill with the symphony of boarding, the click of overhead bins, the murmur of voices, the rustle of newspapers. A sharp-suited executive, a young couple intertwined, a family grappling with a wailing infant. Lily observed them all, her youthful curiosity piqued. Everyone was embarking on a journey, just as she was. Yet, the man in 22C remained an enigma. He hadn't stirred, hadn't spoken, hadn't even acknowledged their presence. He remained transfixed by the window, lost in his own internal landscape. Lily wondered about his destination and the reason for his evident sadness. Carol delved into her tote once more, producing a coloring book and a box of crayons for Lily. "Here you go, sweet pea. This will keep you entertained until we lift off." Lily accepted the materials, but her gaze continued to stray back to the man in 22C. He seemed so out of sync, so different from the other passengers. She couldn't suppress her curiosity about his narrative. Even if Mommy deemed him unsettled, didn't everyone possess a story? Perhaps he too was en route to a family visit. Then, a thought struck her. What if she had misjudged him? What if he was simply enduring a difficult day? Maybe he was merely fatigued. And the stain on his jacket? Perhaps it wasn't coffee at all. Perhaps it was simply something else. A wave of remorse washed over her. She had formed an opinion of him without knowing anything about his life. The man in first class. "Wow, Lily, look at this!" Carol exclaimed, her voice hushed with a mix of awe and disbelief. They navigated through the narrow aisle, past plush, reclining seats bathed in the soft glow of individual reading lights. This was nothing like the cramped, sticky seats they were used to in coach. A flight attendant, all smiles and perfectly coiffed hair, gestured them towards their assigned spots. Lily's eyes darted around, absorbing every detail. Thick carpets cushioned her steps, and the air smelled faintly of citrus and something subtly floral. It was a sensory overload compared to the usual airport bustle. "This is amazing, Mom," she breathed, sinking into her generously padded seat. As Carol fussed with the overhead compartment, Lily's gaze drifted to the window seat across the aisle. Occupying it was a man who seemed utterly out of place. His tweed coat was worn, almost threadbare at the elbows, and a thick, untamed beard obscured much of his face. It wasn't just the beard, it was the overall impression. He looked rumpled, unkempt. Like he'd spent the last few nights sleeping on a park bench, not preparing for a first-class flight. Carol, having stowed her carry-on, followed Lily's gaze. Her eyebrows furrowed slightly. She leaned in conspiratorially, lowering her voice. "Lily, honey, maybe he's upgraded." Lily shrugged, unconvinced. His hands, clasped loosely in his lap, were calloused and weathered. They didn't look like the hands of someone accustomed to luxury. He stared out the window, his expression unreadable, lost in a world of his own. The sunlight caught the dust motes dancing in the air around him, highlighting the contrast between his rough appearance and the pristine environment. A flight attendant approached, offering pre-flight drinks. Champagne flute sparkled under the cabin lights. The man declined with a quiet, almost apologetic, "No, thank you." His voice was a low rumble, surprisingly gentle. Lily watched as the flight attendant moved on, a flicker of something unreadable crossing her face. Was it pity? Discomfort? Lily couldn't quite decipher it. Carol shifted uncomfortably in her seat. "Well, regardless," she said, her voice regaining its usual volume, "we should focus on enjoying this. We deserve it, after everything." She reached for a glossy magazine, its cover promising exotic destinations and effortless elegance. The man by the window remained motionless, a stark contrast to the aspirational images Carol was now absorbed in. Lily couldn't shake the feeling that she was being encouraged to see him as an inconvenience, a blight on their temporary paradise. But the seed of doubt had already been planted in Lily's mind. There was something in the man's quiet dignity, in the way he carried himself despite his appearance, that intrigued her. He didn't seem embarrassed or ashamed, merely present. His eyes, when she risked another glance, held a depth of sadness, but also a quiet strength. The plane began to taxi, and Lily found herself wondering about the stories hidden beneath that worn coat and scruffy beard. Whispers and unease. The boarding music crescendoed as Lily and her mother nestled into the plush embrace of their first-class seats. Crimson velvet, a luxurious haven, stood in stark contrast to the economy sardine can they usually occupied. Lily, practically vibrating with excitement, could barely contain herself. London. The reality still felt like a fantastical dream. "Mom, isn't this incredible?" she breathed, eyes sparkling. Carol offered a wan smile, but her attention was snagged by a passenger a few rows ahead. He was an older gentleman, his face a roadmap of weathered experience, his garment simple amidst the surrounding couture. A worn, olive-drab duffel sat meekly at his feet. Carol leaned in, her voice hushed beneath the announcements. "Lily, look at him. Doesn't he strike you as different?" Lily followed her mother's gaze. He certainly stood apart. His hands, resting loosely, were marked by calluses and old scars. His eyes, though weary, held a depth that intrigued Lily. A twinge of disquiet stirred within her. Though a stranger, her mother's words had planted a seed of suspicion. Did he truly belong here? I don't know, Mom, Lily murmured, a pang of guilt surfacing. She shouldn't jump to conclusions. But the seed had sprouted, its roots digging deep. The man shifted, his eyes briefly connecting with Lily's. He offered a fleeting, almost apologetic smile before turning to the window, his gaze lost in the outside world. Lily averted her eyes, heat rising in her cheeks. His smile wasn't menacing, just melancholy. She tried to dismiss the feeling, to recapture the joy of the impending trip, but Carol's observation lingered. Different. Different. The word echoed like a persistent whisper. As the plane taxied, Lily stole another glance. He remained transfixed by the view, his expression an enigma. Her imagination conjured scenarios, fueled by her mother's subtle judgment and her own restless thoughts. Had he somehow slipped past security and into first class? Was he about to cause a scene? Reason told her these were absurd, yet the disquiet remained, a dull ache. During the ascent, Lily played with her earbuds, feigning absorption in music. She avoided his gaze, acutely aware of her own self-consciousness. Every rustle of his bag, every suppressed sigh, magnified her apprehension. She aspired to be a kind, open-hearted person, but Carol's remark had poisoned her perspective, casting a pall of distrust over an unknown soul. The fastened seatbelt sign winked off, and a flight attendant began serving refreshments. Lily observed as the man politely declined alcohol, requesting only water. His voice was soft, almost hesitant. Objectively, there was nothing suspect, yet Lily couldn't shake the niggling feeling of something amiss. She knew she was being unfair, judging him on externalities. But the insidious doubts, nurtured by her mother's unvoiced anxieties, had taken hold, trapping her in a loop of unease and judgmental musings. She could only hope she could banish them before they soured her vacation, and, more importantly, before she acted in a way she would later regret. Mr. Thompson's kindness. Mr. Thompson caught Lily's eye again. This time, a warm, genuine smile stretched across his face, crinkling the corners of his eyes. Lily quickly looked away, fiddling with the edge of her coloring book. His smile felt undeserved. By her. She knew she'd been staring, judging. Her mother's words about appearances echoed in her head, but they rang hollow now. The flight attendant, a young woman with a bright smile and neatly pinned-up hair, approached Mr. Thompson. "Good morning, Mr. Thompson," she said, her voice genuinely cheerful. "Welcome aboard. Can I offer you your usual orange juice?" Lily's head snapped up. Mr. Thompson? His usual orange juice? This wasn't how Lily imagined things worked for someone who looked like him. He replied, his voice a low rumble, "Good morning, Sarah." "That would be lovely, thank you." Sarah nodded and moved efficiently to the galley, returning moments later with a small glass of orange juice. She placed it carefully on his tray table. "Enjoy your flight, Mr. Thompson." Lily watched, a knot forming in her stomach. Mr. Thompson sipped his juice, his gaze fixed on something outside the window. He seemed oblivious to Lily's scrutiny, lost in his own thoughts. "Mom," Lily whispered, tugging at Carol's sleeve. "Did you hear that?" She called him Mr. Thompson. And she knew his usual drink. Carol, who had been engrossed in a magazine, lowered it slightly. "Yes, honey. So, he's not just some. Lily trailed off, unable to voice the unkind thoughts she'd been harboring. Carol sighed, placing her magazine on the tray table. "Lily, it's important to be aware of your surroundings. Not everyone is who they seem." But even as she said the words, her tone lacked its earlier conviction. She, too, seemed a little less sure of her initial assessment. Lily felt a wave of guilt wash over her. She had been so quick to judge, so influenced by her mother's subtle cues. Now, sitting just a few feet away from Mr. Thompson, she felt a deep sense of shame. He wasn't bothering anyone, not causing any trouble. He was just sitting there, drinking his orange juice. And she had already decided he was, what? A vagrant? A threat? The plane began to taxi down the runway, the engines rumbling to life. Lily gripped the armrest, her thoughts swirling. Who was Mr. Thompson? Why did the flight attendant know him? And why had she been so quick to judge him based solely on his appearance? She glanced at her mother, who was now staring straight ahead, her expression unreadable. Lily knew she had to do something. She couldn't let this feeling of unease and guilt fester inside her. But what could she do? Apologize? To Mr. Thompson? The thought was terrifying. The plane picked up speed, the ground blurring outside the window. Lily closed her eyes, the roar of the engines filling her ears. She took a deep breath, trying to calm her racing heart. She knew one thing for sure: she needed to understand Mr. Thompson. She needed to understand why she had been so wrong. Bumpy skies. The engine steady thrum, almost a soporific drone, hiccupped and died. The aircraft bucked violently, a rude awakening that shot an icy finger down Lily's spine. Her eyes flew open. The formerly pristine, cloud-dotted vista had dissolved into a bruised, swirling grey. Another jolt, more forceful, sent Barnaby, her threadbare bear, dancing a jig on her lap. "Mommy!" Her voice, a mere breath, trembled with apprehension. Her mother, absorbed in a glossy magazine, offered only a cursory glance. "Just some chop, darling. Nothing to fret about." But Lily's stomach churned with unease. The jet pitched downward, the seatbelt biting into her midsection. Barnaby's button eyes seemed to reflect her own escalating worry. Clutching him tighter, she found solace in the familiar feel of his worn fur. Above, the cabin lights flickered, painting fleeting, elongated shapes against the ceiling. A restless murmur swept through the passenger rows. Some forced nervous laughter, others clutched at their armrests, knuckles bone-white. A wail erupted from a baby several rows ahead, mirroring the fear Lily couldn't voice. She squeezed her eyes shut, yearning for the sanctuary of her bedroom. "Mommy, I'm scared," she whispered, her voice quivering. Her mother sighed, finally relinquishing her magazine. "Lily, please. You're being difficult. It's just air. Stop behaving like a toddler." Tears pricked at Lily's eyes. She detested being called childish, yet she couldn't quell the rising panic. The plane was a wild thing, thrashing against the turbulent heavens. She burrowed her face into Barnaby's comforting bulk, attempting to drown out the creaks and groans of stressed metal and the anxious whispers circulating around her. Across the aisle, Mr. Thompson, previously engrossed in his reading, lowered his book. No words of comfort, no empty assurances, no placating smiles. He simply watched. He observed the white-knuckled grip on the faded teddy, the delicate tremble of her small frame, the glistening of unshed tears clinging precariously to her lashes. He saw, too, the mother's dismissive gesture, the faint flush of vexation coloring her cheeks. He understood the weight of fear, the sensation of feeling vulnerable and insignificant when confronted with something immense and implacable. He had battled demons far greater than mere turbulence. But he recognized that fear, regardless of its origin, held genuine power. It didn't diminish with birthdays or accumulated experiences, it merely morphed into different guises. He closed his book, marking his place with a calloused finger. Unsure of what he could offer, he found himself unable to disregard the silent appeal in the little girl's wide, frightened eyes. The aircraft convulsed, causing the overhead bins to rattle ominously. Lily gasped, burying herself further into Barnaby's embrace. Mr. Thompson adjusted his posture almost imperceptibly, his gaze steady and unwavering, a silent beacon promising something Lily couldn't quite name, but something that offered a faint glimmer of hope in the storm-tossed skies. A story of storms. The turbulence intensified, rattling the cabin like a tin can in a hailstorm. Lily squeezed her eyes shut, gripping the armrest so tightly her knuckles turned white. A gasp escaped her lips. "Rough patch, isn't it?" Mr. Thompson's voice was a low rumble, barely audible over the roar of the wind buffeting the plane. Lily nodded, unable to speak. Her stomach churned. She risked a peek out the window, where only swirling grey clouds met her gaze. Mr. Thompson shifted in his seat. "You know," he said, after a moment, "this reminds me of a time I was flying over the Himalayas. In a helicopter." Lily blinked, momentarily distracted from her fear. "A helicopter? In the Himalayas? What were you doing?" He chuckled softly. "Resupply runs. Bringing medicine and food to remote villages. Sometimes evacuating the injured." Lily's imagined image of Mr. Thompson shifted. She had pictured him shuffling papers in a quiet office, perhaps a retired accountant or librarian. Not piloting a helicopter through treacherous mountain passes. "We got caught in a storm," he continued, his voice calm, almost detached. "Worse than this, I'd say. The wind was howling, visibility was near zero, and the helicopter was bucking like a wild horse. We were tossed around like a toy." Lily listened, captivated. The fear hadn't entirely vanished, but it had receded, replaced by a growing fascination. "I remember looking at the altimeter, watching the numbers drop, thinking we were going to crash into the side of a mountain. It was terrifying." He paused, then added, "But you know, even in the middle of that, there was a strange sort of peace. Acceptance, maybe. I knew I'd done everything I could. All I could do was trust my training, trust my machine, and hope for the best." "What happened?" Lily asked, her voice barely a whisper. "We made it through," he said, a hint of a smile playing on his lips. "Barely. Landed in a small clearing, waited out the storm, and flew back the next day. The helicopter needed some serious repairs, and so did I, come to think of it." He looked at Lily, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "The thing about storms, Lily, is that they always pass. No matter how dark or frightening they seem, they eventually run out of steam. And when they do, the sun always comes out again." The plane lurched violently, throwing Lily against her seatbelt. She gasped, but this time, the fear wasn't quite as sharp. She looked out the window again, and though the clouds were still swirling, she imagined them thinning, breaking apart. Mr. Thompson's story had woven a strange sort of spell, a buffer against the chaos. He, this quiet, unassuming man, had faced down storms that made this turbulence seem like a gentle breeze. If he could do that, she reasoned, she could certainly handle a bumpy flight. She took a deep breath, consciously relaxing her grip on the armrest. The plane continued to shake, but Lily found she could almost smile. The storm, she knew, would pass. And when it did, she would be ready. And she knew she would see Mr. Thompson in a different light after this. The war hero. Lily chewed on her thumbnail, the artificial cherry scent of the nail polish doing little to calm her swirling thoughts. Mr. Thompson was still asleep, his breathing even and untroubled. She'd been wrong about him, terribly wrong. Her mother would be mortified if she knew Lily's first impression. Now, she just felt stupid. "Excuse me," she whispered, nudging his arm gently. "Mr. Thompson?" He blinked slowly, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "Everything all right, Miss Rodriguez?" "Yes, sorry to bother you. I was just curious. What did you do before you retired?" She cringed inwardly. It sounded intrusive, even rude. Mr. Thompson's gaze drifted towards the window, watching the wisps of clouds dance across the sky. "Oh, a bit of this and that. Mostly, I worked with machines. Learned to fix them, operate them." "Like what kind of machines?" Lily pressed, emboldened by his seeming willingness to talk. He chuckled softly. "Well, the kind that fly." Lily's eyes widened. "You were a pilot?" "Among other things." A voice interrupted them. "Excuse me, sir? Mr. Thompson?" A man, maybe 10 years older than Lily, was standing in the aisle, his face flushed. He held a crumpled newspaper in his hand. Mr. Thompson turned, a flicker of something, surprise? Crossing his face. "Yes?" "David Chen," the man said, extending his hand. "I?" I don't mean to intrude, but I recognized you from the article." He gestured to the newspaper. Mr. Thompson shook his hand, his grip firm. "I haven't seen one of those in years." His voice was low, almost a mumble. David Chen's eyes shone with admiration. "Sergeant Thompson, you saved my cousin's life. He was with the 3rd Platoon, Bravo Company, back in, well, it doesn't matter. He wouldn't be here if it wasn't for you." Lily's breath caught in her throat. "Sergeant? What article?" This was like something out of a movie. Mr. Thompson's expression remained unchanged. "I was just doing my job, son. Your job was flying a medevac helicopter into the thick of it, under heavy fire, to pull wounded soldiers out. My cousin told me you made 3 trips that day. 3. No one else would go. He said you were a stone-cold hero." David Chen's voice cracked with emotion. Lily felt a wave of heat rise in her face. She thought of her earlier judgment, her snide remarks to her mother. This man, this quiet, unassuming man, was a hero. Mr. Thompson looked uncomfortable. "It was a long time ago." David Chen wouldn't let it go. "My family, we owe you everything." "Thank you, sir. Thank you for your service." He bowed his head slightly, then retreated back to his seat, still clutching the newspaper. The air in the small space around Lily and Mr. Thompson felt thick, charged with unspoken words. Lily stared at him, seeing him in a completely new light. The worn hands, the lines etched around his eyes, they weren't signs of poverty, but of a life lived with courage and sacrifice. "Mr. Thompson," she began, her voice barely a whisper. He raised a hand, stopping her. "Don't say anything, Miss Rodriguez. What's past is past." He closed his eyes again, leaning back in his seat. "Just enjoy the rest of your flight." Lily sank back into her own seat, her mind reeling. The cherry scent of her nail polish now seemed cloying, artificial. She had a lot to think about. A change of heart. Lily trailed behind her mother, kicking a loose pebble across the polished floor of the airport terminal. She'd been practically bouncing with excitement just an hour ago, eager for their vacation, but now a heavy feeling settled in her stomach. The image of Mr. Thompson sitting alone in first class, his clothes rumpled and his eyes distant, kept replaying in her mind. Carol stopped abruptly near a bustling coffee shop, her attention caught by the aroma of freshly brewed coffee. "Lily, why don't you wait here? I'm going to grab a latte." Lily nodded, sinking onto a nearby bench, her gaze drifting towards a group of people standing near the magazine stand. David Chen's voice rose above the general din, clear and filled with emotion. "Saved my cousin's life, Mr. Thompson. I can never thank you enough." Lily leaned forward, her curiosity piqued. "Please, David, it was a long time ago," Mr. Thompson replied, his voice a low murmur. "Anyone would have done the same." "No, sir," David insisted, his voice cracking slightly. "Not everyone would have run back into that fire. My family, we owe you everything." Lily's breath hitched. Fire? What were they talking about? She strained to hear the rest of the conversation, piecing together fragments: a burning building, trapped civilians, a selfless act of bravery. Mr. Thompson, she realized with a jolt, wasn't just some disheveled stranger, he was a hero. A wave of shame washed over her, hotter than the desert sun they were flying towards. She remembered her mother's whispered comments, her own quick judgment based solely on appearances. How could she have been so wrong? She felt a tap on her shoulder and looked up to see her mother holding 2 steaming cups. Carol followed her gaze to the group near the magazine stand. "Oh, it's him," Carol said, her voice softer than before. She had overheard enough of the conversation to understand. Her face flushed a delicate pink. I didn't realize." They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of their misjudgment hanging heavy in the air. Lily felt tears prick at her eyes. Carol sighed, handing Lily one of the lattes. "Come on, Lily. We need to apologize." Lily nodded, her heart pounding. They approached the group, their footsteps hesitant. David excused himself, leaving Carol and Lily face to face with Mr. Thompson. "Mr. Thompson," Carol began, her voice trembling slightly. We wanted to apologize. We made a terrible assumption about you, and we were wrong. So very wrong." She extended her hand, her eyes filled with genuine remorse. "Thank you for your service, and for your bravery." Mr. Thompson looked at her, his gaze steady and kind. He took her hand in his grip surprisingly firm. "There's no need for apologies," he said quietly. "We all make mistakes." He then turned his gaze to Lily, giving her a gentle smile. Lily swallowed hard, the latte suddenly feeling heavy in her hands. "I'm sorry too, Mr. Thompson," she mumbled, her cheeks burning. Mr. Thompson simply nodded, his eyes conveying a message of understanding and forgiveness. "Now, you two enjoy your vacation," he said, turning back to David. As they walked away, Lily felt a mix of relief and lingering shame. The airport suddenly seemed brighter, the air lighter. She knew she would never forget this lesson. Appearances could be deceiving, and true heroism often came in the most unexpected packages. Kindness takes flight. Lily held out the small bag of airplane snacks towards Mr. Thompson. Her cheeks burned, a blush creeping up her neck. "Mr. Thompson," she mumbled, barely audible over the hum of the aircraft. I wanted you to have these." Carol watched, her own face a mixture of pride and lingering discomfort. She subtly nudged Lily forward, offering a silent encouragement. Mr. Thompson looked up from his book, his brow furrowed in surprise. He glanced at the bag, then back at Lily, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "Well, now, that's mighty kind of you, Lily." He took the bag, his large, calloused hand dwarfing the tiny package of pretzels. "Thank you." He tore open the bag and popped a pretzel into his mouth, chewing thoughtfully. "Reminds me of a time I was in, well, let's just say a hot place. We were out of rations, hadn't seen fresh food in weeks. All we had were these stale crackers that tasted like cardboard. Suddenly, this little girl, no bigger than you, Lily, came running up to us. She offered us a handful of dates, all sticky and sweet. Best darn dates I ever tasted. Made me remember what we were fighting for." He chuckled, a low rumble in his chest. "Turned out, those dates were probably older than I was at the time, but they tasted like heaven." Lily giggled, the tension in her shoulders easing. Carol smiled warmly at Mr. Thompson, a genuine smile that reached her eyes. "So, you see," Mr. Thompson continued, "a little kindness, no matter how small, can go a long way." He winked. "These pretzels are pretty good too." The rest of the flight passed in comfortable silence, punctuated by the occasional shared glance or murmured comment. Lily found herself sneaking peeks at Mr. Thompson, observing the quiet dignity he carried himself with. She noticed the way he treated the flight attendants with respect, the way he offered a helping hand to an elderly woman struggling with her luggage. As the plane began its descent, Carol leaned over to Lily. "Honey, I'm really sorry about earlier. I was wrong to judge Mr. Thompson. He's a good man." Lily nodded, her eyes shining with understanding. "Me too, Mom. I shouldn't have listened to what other people said." When the plane finally landed, they waited patiently for their turn to disembark. Mr. Thompson stood to retrieve his worn duffel bag from the overhead compartment. "Well, ladies," he said, turning to face them, "it's been a pleasure. Safe travels." "Thank you, Mr. Thompson," Lily said, her voice clear and sincere. "For everything." Carol extended her hand. "Thank you, Mr. Thompson. For your service, and for your kindness." He shook her hand firmly, his grip surprisingly strong. "The pleasure was all mine." As they walked down the jet bridge, Lily turned back to watch Mr. Thompson. He was already disappearing into the throng of passengers, a solitary figure blending into the crowd. She squeezed her mother's hand. "Mom," she said, "we should try to be kinder, always. To everyone." Carol squeezed back. "I agree, Lilybug." Kindness takes flight, and we should all be passengers.